Hi guys, Tyler Anthony here with Tyler Anthony. So today we're going to talk about the role of upper body plyometrics and ballistic training in throwing velocity. Alright, so I think one of the traps that people tend to fall into is they chase strength and increasing strength for too long, right? We all know that peak force is important, right? It's kind of the quality that underlies pretty much everything we do in sports. But if we end up chasing that for too long, we're not going to keep getting the benefits from it that we get from it initially, right? So for example, if we apply this to sprinting, right? Dr. Matt Ray, now at the University of Alabama, has found that basically a back squat above 1.7 times body weight no longer gives additional benefit or increases sprinting speed. Right, so I think we can apply a similar concept to throwing a baseball, right? Very minimal resistance in terms of what we're doing and extremely high velocities. So how much force do we really need to be capable of in order to kind of have our maximum performance on the field, right? So at some point, the returns from strength diminishes and we have to kind of change our focus to be more on the rate of force development, or RFD, all right, and elasticity. So kind of how do we go about doing that? Well, ballistic training and plyometric training are kind of the ways that I would do that. So ballistic training and plyometric training are similar. Ballistic basically just means that we're going to be releasing an implement or leaving the ground and may or may not involve the stretch shortening cycle. Whereas plyometrics always involve the stretch shortening cycle. Okay? So a ballistic movement can be plyometric, but may not necessarily be. Okay? So we can then further kind of divide the stretch shortening cycle into the fast and slow stretch shortening cycle. So the fast SSC, right, will be anything under 250 milliseconds, right? The slow stretch shortening cycle will be anything kind of over that. All right? And then from there, we can kind of build out a training plan to work on our rate of force development and our elasticity. So plyometric training and ballistic training has benefits past what just kind of fast barbell or dumbbell movements will have, in that there's a deceleration component to these lifts, even moving them at maximal effort, because we're holding on to the implement. So we have to decelerate, whether it's 50 or 70% of the way through the movement. Whereas, obviously, throwing a medicine ball, jumping as high as you can, jumping as far as you can, whatever it might be, we can accelerate the whole way kind of through that movement, right? Because we're going to actually leave the ground, and the implement's going to leave our hands. So that's kind of a benefit there. Okay, so what changes are we really getting from kind of the plyometric type training? Well, we're going to change basically how much elastic energy we can store and then utilize. We might get some changes in the length-tension relationship. When necessary, we might get changes in terms of the pre-tension of muscles. The other thing is we may get some changes in the reflexes. So we're really after specific adaptations when we're talking about using these training. These methods are just kind of the means of getting there. The adaptations are ultimately the goals that we have from this that are going to have the best transfer to what we're doing on the field. Okay, so digging a little bit deeper into the adaptations we can get from these plyometric and ballistic movements, right? If we think about kind of with throwing, we have a limited time period, right, to produce as much force as we possibly can. Okay, so there's time constraints here. So that means rate of force development needs to come up, and elastic energy storage utilization needs to be increased. So how do we do that? So one of the ways is the length-tension relationship. So every muscle basically has an optimal length at which it produces its most possible force, right? So too long, can't produce as much. Too short, can't produce as much. There's kind of a Goldilocks effect here, okay? But what we can do with kind of eccentric training, so like the portion at the beginning of plyometrics, is we can actually lengthen that optimal kind of length to produce force of a given kind of muscle tendon unit. And so what kind of happens then is that we get more elastic force from the passive elements, the tendons, the fascia, the aponeuroses, right? So the more they're stretched, the greater rebound effect we get, right? So now we can produce more force because we have the volitional effect from the muscle, and then we're also getting more elastic force from these passive elements. So that's kind of how the length-tension relationship come into play here, okay? The next piece is kind of the reflexes. So this is where kind of the Golgi tendon organs and the muscle spindles come into play. So muscle spindles basically sense magnitude and speed of stretch, okay? So when they sense a muscle tendon is being stretched really fast or really kind of deeply, they basically send a signal to contract the muscle to then kind of shorten or reduce that stretch, Okay, so like if we think about kind of getting a rebound effect from like a drop jump, right? We drop, we hit the ground, we immediately rebound up. The myotatic or stretch reflex is kind of playing a role there. So the Golgi tendon organs have a similar role, right? But they're sensing basically kind of force output. Okay, so if force becomes too great, they shut the muscle off and it relaxes. So what we need to do is kind of basically raise the ceiling on each of these. So we want maybe a little bit greater stretch to be able to occur. So we need the muscle spindles to kind of allow that. And then we also want the Golgi tendon organ to kind of force that muscle to relax later. So basically kind of taking the governor off that motor to some degree, if you will. Okay, so that's kind of the next piece. One of the other pieces that's kind of important to consider is how we then layer our training to kind of progress it so we can get the maximal benefit, right, from our most intense variations. So basically what we do is we're going to sequence them extensive to intensive. So basically what that means is we're going to be doing higher volume, lower intensity stuff in the beginning, right, kind of getting used to these movements. This may include kind of some strength requirements here. And then as we go on, we're getting more and more intense. We're using lower volumes, that kind of thing, to kind of maximize the adaptations we're going to get. So in the beginning, for example, I don't think there's hard and fast strength requirements, but I do think it may be a good idea if we're thinking about like upper body. Let's take the kind of pushing side of things as an example. I think it'd be a good idea for most athletes to kind of reach like an intermediate strength level. So let's think about, it's probably about 1 times body weight for a dumbbell bench press, all right, for about a set of 5. I think if you're there, you're probably good to start kind of adding some of this stuff in, all right? And then the first step might be we use kind of oscillatory. So Cal Dietz kind of popularized these, but basically what you're doing is you're going to pick a range of motion, and you're basically bouncing through that. So it kind of is a nice bridge between like stereotypical kind of weight room movements and then our plyometric movements. So it kind of teaches the athletes to rhythmically contract and relax and that kind of thing, and basically gets us prepped for more intense kind of plyometric activity. So the first step might be an oscillatory dumbbell bench press in a deep position. All right. The next step may then be kind of an elevated oscillatory plyo push-up in the deep position. Then we go to the floor, we do the same thing, all right? Then we go from the floor to a plyo push-up with a stiff landing, okay? Then we may use shock push-ups, right? So that's just kind of an example progression, but you can see, and we can use med balls and other things like that for this as well. But you can kind of see that the upper body plyometrics can play an important role in kind of helping guys gain velocity once we've kind of used up what we're going to get from our general kind of training, so strength and things like that. Once we've used up those adaptations, it's time to kind of advance our focus a little bit, and that's where the holistic and plyometric upper body movements come.